With tears streaming down his face as he held my hand, he turned away from the casket and looked in my eyes and said, "Pray for me." All of my life, my daddy has sat on that front pew. I don't think I can sit there for his funeral. Hello and welcome to Bible Talk with Eminem. I'm Miss Marie. Jesus said in John 14:27, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you, not as the world gives, do I give to you. Let not your hearts be troubled, neither let them be afraid." Then in Philippians 4, verses 6 through 7, it says, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your mind in Christ Jesus." That peace, the God kind of peace that passes all understanding. Have you ever experienced that kind of peace? The kind that makes no sense, that is unexplainable yet undeniable. The peace that defies logic and surpasses all understanding. In April 1984, our son was 12 months old and I was 29 years of age with a diagnosis of cancer. Surgery was scheduled for 6 weeks from that date. We were believing for healing and complete recovery. Yet, with a young child, we recognized the responsibility and the weightiness. And we decided it was prudent to prepare a will, since we were facing such circumstances. I remember with pen and paper in hand, we sat down on the couch and with our somber thoughts, facing the weightiness of this task and the unknown of the possibilities of the future. Our emotions were stilled and we were ready for the task at hand. Surprisingly, we never completed the task. As a matter of fact, we got to giggling and we laughed and we laughed. I can't tell you what we laughed about. I don't even know that night that we could tell you what we laughed about. We just were laughing. I remember laughing so hard that I rolled off of the couch onto the floor. There was a peace that came with that laughter that was unexplainable. And day by day, that peace held us in its sway. But in the back of my mind, I was concerned about that very last week. Week 2, week 3, week 4, week 5. I had no doubts. But that last week, planning to leave my child and head into the surgery, I had this questioning. On the Wednesday before my surgery that was scheduled for a week later, my husband called me about 2:30 in the afternoon and he said, "Marie, I've just received a call from St. Joseph's Hospital. They've had a cancellation and they want to move your surgery up until day after tomorrow. They want you there in the morning, very early for pre-op." Well, needless to say, the next few hours were a whirlwind, preparing for that I had expected to do the last week, for it to be separated from my son for several weeks, and all the packing and planning that was involved in that had to be put into just a few hours. Sometime in the early morning hours, we fell asleep, exhausted, only to have to wake up just a few hours later to head out to Atlanta for the pre-op. I remember during the pre-op, one of the nurses looking at me and she said, "I have never seen anyone who's facing the surgery that you're facing with the demeanor that you have." because I was almost as if I was out shopping or visiting with a friend. I remember looking at her and saying, I haven't either. There was no other explanation. I couldn't tell her why. Not then. I couldn't explain the peace that I had. The surgery was a success. There was no treatment needed. And 46 years later, I am still cancer free. That was my first experience of that pervasive peace that passes all comprehension. On August 18, 1979, we're preparing for my husband's father, my father-in-law's funeral. Kenneth was the baby boy, and he was very close to his father, who had died unexpectedly at the age of 65. As we arrived in the church parking lot, and that dreaded approach into the church that was so deeply dreaded by my husband, we followed the casket into the church, and as we walked through the doors, we were greeted not by a person, but by an unexplainable peace. We looked at each other almost in disbelief, with smiles on our faces as we squeezed one another's hands, and we walked down the aisle and sat on that front pew and would smile at each other throughout the remainder of the service, giddy almost with the presence that was tangible to us. I remember following the casket out of the church and getting into the car of my brother-in-law who was driving, and as he closed the door and started the ignition, he just exclaimed, "Did y'all feel that? Did you feel it? When we walked into that place, did you feel it?" You see, that peace was not just a figment of our imagination. It wasn't just a psychological trick that our minds was playing on us. It was a tangible presence of the power and the peace of God. Have you ever had the experience of that kind of peace? Do you know the peace speaker? As that song goes, I know the peace speaker. I know him by name. I know the peace speaker. He controls the winds and the waves of your life when he says, peace, be still. They have to obey. I'm so glad I know the peace speaker. I know him by name. Oh, Jesus, the peace speaker. I know him by name, but even more awesome than that, he knows me by name. He takes his super and puts it on our natural. I called it unnatural peace, but it's really supernatural peace. It's the peace of God, that supernatural presence of God. I love you and appreciate you. I appreciate your viewing, your likes, your comments, your shares, your subscriptions, but most of all, I appreciate you. That unique, gifted, God-inspired creation that's you, that God knows by your name. He even has given you a special name, one that probably you may not even know yet. I don't think I know mine. but we will know. He knows us. He knows our worries, our anxieties, and our cares. But we can know His peace. Until next time, walk in that unnatural, supernatural